In 1977, a 27-year-old student and civil servant named Philippe de Villiers stumbled upon the ruins of a medieval castle in his home region of Vendée, France, which would inspire him to embark on a journey that would dominate the next 45 years of his life. He set about to create a historical theme park buried in the French countryside, with Vikings, knights, Roman gladiators, and some of the wildest and most terrifying attractions in one of the most insane theme parks I've ever seen. This is the story of Puy Du Fou. Before any theme park would be built in the grounds around his newly purchased castle of Puy Du Fou, a name that comes from Latin and means beech tree hill, Philippe's first venture on the castle grounds was instead a standalone nighttime spectacular that he named CinéScénie, the self-proclaimed largest nighttime show in the world. CinéScénie was a massive 90-minute show written by Philippe to tell the story of a local family named the Maupiliers, and their history in the region spanning from the 14th century to the outbreak of the Second World War. This show still exists today, and according to the park's own website, has been seen by an estimated 13 million people over its 45-year history. CinéScénie is huge. Seriously, it's kind of hard to put across the scale of this show, but imagine something like Disney's Fantasmic times 100. The park's website also claims that nowadays the show involves over 2,500 actors, which I know sounds very hard to believe, and to be honest I still don't really believe that number, but it's easier to see where this number comes from when you see the show itself. I mean, this thing involves horse riders, sword fighters, dancers, actors, flame jugglers, pigs. Maybe the pigs are included in that number? CinéScénie uses original music, live theatre, stunts, fireworks, lighting effects, 3D projection, and large controllable fountains to tell a story of the generations of the Maupilier family and their connection to different eras of French history, using the 14th century castle of Puy Du Fou as a backdrop. The original CinéScénie opened in 1978, a year after the purchase of the castle, with a smaller, although still massive cast of 600 volunteers. Initially unsuccessful in its first year, changes to the show brought about an explosion in popularity, bringing visitors from across France. Before long though, the Puy Du Fou organisation would struggle to cope with the demand for their show. A new, much larger grandstand would be installed to increase the show's capacity, but eventually, de Villiers and his team started looking for ways to expand the experience. Sometime in the early 1980s, Puy Du Fou's competitors in the French tourism industry were taking trips abroad to California to visit Disneyland, which provided them inspiration for the likes of Mirapolis and the now third most popular theme park in France, Parc Asterix. And so, not to be outdone, a group from the Puy Du Fou team also took a trip to America, to the east to visit Walt Disney World in Florida, and see how they might capitalise on their show's success. The team were extremely impressed with the attention to detail and the level of professionalism with which Disney operated compared to what they were used to back home. The theming, the quality, and importantly, the scale of the parks in Walt Disney World were unlike anything they had seen in Europe. And so, inspired by what they'd seen on their trip, they returned to France to create a highly ambitious expansion to their tourist destination. In 1989, the Puy Du Fou Association finally opened the Grand Parc of Puy Du Fou, in the surrounding grounds of the castle. Going well beyond what CinéScénie could offer, this was an entire theme park, to act as a daytime companion to their show and keep tourists around for longer. In sticking with the theme of the nighttime show, the new park was entirely centered around French history, with multiple attractions representing different eras and important events. And unlike other theme parks that came before it, and perhaps totally unique in the theme park world, Puy Du Fou was a theme park without a single ride. Instead of having rides, the park was made up of entirely shows, mostly stunt shows and a few walkthrough attractions, which I think is one of the many things that makes it such an interesting park. And these aren't just basic, small-scale shows intended to cut the costs that would arise from building a roller coaster, but massive, ridiculous stunt shows on a huge scale, that leave you asking how they managed to have so many of them in the same park. So let's spend some time going over some of the most popular attractions Puy Du Fou has to offer. But first, a word from our sponsor. Skillshare. If you're looking to expand your creative potential, pick up a new skill, or uncover new career possibilities, Skillshare has classes to suit everyone's goals. You may know Skillshare for its classes in film and video editing, photography, and illustration. But did you know that Skillshare also offers hundreds of career-focused classes too? Whether that's a class in time management, brand marketing, or how to diversify your income to gain greater control of your financial future, Skillshare has classes to suit all your career-oriented needs. For me, I've been using Skillshare to learn how to improve my time management. I make these videos in my free time, and with the amount of work it can take to get a video together, finishing them on time can be an incredibly daunting task. That's why Ali Abdel's course on productivity for creators has helped me come up with strategies for working more efficiently. His advice on being targeted with the tasks I set for myself has helped me break up this video into smaller, more manageable chunks, and has made my overall process much more effective. If you're looking to explore the many different classes Skillshare has to offer, the first 1,000 people to use the first link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you very much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now, back to Puy Du Fou. Now just quickly, one problem that Puy Du Fou does have is that, well, everything's in French, including the titles of all the shows, and a lot of the official translations aren't great. My ability to read French is actually okay, but it's not perfect. So I'm going to offer the best translation I can for all these shows, and I'll put the French names of everything on screen as well. Guests first enter Puy Du Fou in a fairly nondescript gravel pathway, where around a corner to their right, they're greeted with the first attraction, Richelieu's Musketeer. The show is one of the few indoor theatre shows, and takes place in a grand 18th century inspired building, a sort of spin-off to the famous Three Musketeers story, which itself takes place mostly around nearby La Rochelle. Puy Du Fou's show is, like everything else in the park, a massive grand-scale spectacle. This one, a swashbuckling adventure involving sword fighting, fight sequences, and stunts on horseback, with lavish sets and costumes themed to the era. Horses dance on stage with and without their riders, and towards the end of the show, the stage is even flooded for the grand finale. The next, much larger show you might encounter at Puy Du Fou is The Secret of the Lance, another horse riding and sword fighting stunt show, this time outdoors and set against the backdrop of a medieval keep. The show takes place during the 100 Years' War between England and France in the 15th century, as Joan of Arc gathers the best knights in France to fight off the English. The show starts off with a jousting competition between French knights outside the keep, who show off more horseback stunts like the Musketeer show, until suddenly the English soldiers appear and a battle ensues between the English and the French, all stunt performers doing choreographed fights. Amidst the chaos, the show's main character, a young shepherdess named Marguerite, tries to escape and discovers a lance with supernatural powers. Then the giant castle wall lowers to reveal the battle between the English and the French has reached the keep. More dramatic fight sequences take place between the French and English soldiers, both on the ground and on the surrounding sets, some scaling down the side of the giant keep and with pyrotechnic effects going off around them. Then at the climax of the show, Marguerite uses the powers of the lance to protect herself and the keep and defeat the English. And the show ends with the gigantic keep set rotating 180 degrees and the castle wall re-emerging to reveal a medieval tapestry of the battle. The Secret of the Lance is a really impressive show, and an example of the philosophy of grandeur and gigantism which is everywhere at this park. Puy Du Fou doesn't really do forced perspective. The intentional downscaling of buildings in a way to make them seem bigger than they really are is only done in limited areas, with the park for the most part opting to just build things full size, which is absolutely insane, but also really, really cool. Something I found quite funny about this show when I went to Puy Du Fou is that, of course, it being a French show, it chooses to frame the French as the good guys and England as the bad guys. Whereas every depiction of this era that I'm used to typically frames the French as the bad guys. And it's just interesting to see how it's depicted the other way around. The Secret of the Lance is massive, but it isn't even Puy Du Fou's biggest show. And another show that matches its scale is simply called The Vikings, a show set in a French village in the year 1000 as the inhabitants attempt to protect themselves from a Viking raid. This show begins with the village celebrating the wedding of two villagers, Cybele and Aldrich. But while the celebrations are going on, a group of monks arrive to warn the village about approaching Viking longships, and the people prepare to defend themselves. Before long, the first Viking longship arrives from atop a hill and slides down it, crashing into the water below, as the raid begins at the base of the village's 22-meter tall watchtower. Choreographed sword fighting makes up the majority of the show, alongside swinging from ropes, jumps into the water, and going down a zip line at the top of the tower. But the climax of the show is the moment a much larger, full-sized Viking longship rises from underneath the water, with Vikings on board in front of the village. Eventually though, the villagers defeat the Vikings as the sarcophagus of the patron saint of the area rises from the water at the end of the show. The moment you see the ship rising from underneath the water for the first time is super dramatic and a really cool moment. I think it's also my favourite special effect of the park. It's also really funny because there's a point later where the ship goes back under the water, and the Vikings on the ship, that are real people, just stand on it as they sink below the waterline. Also, this show has a herd of live Highland cattle in it too, because of course it does. Water effects are used quite a bit at Puy Du Fou, like in another show, The Knights of the Round Table, which tells the story of the wizard Merlin putting the knight Arthur through a series of trials to prove his worthiness as the next king. This show involves all the iconic moments from King Arthur folklore, such as the Sword in the Stone and the Lady of the Lake, but its best moment is when the lake opens up in spectacular fashion to reveal the round table underwater. On the other side of the park, you'll find the indoor theatre show The Last Plume. This is a stage show that tells a dramatised version of the life of François de Charette, a French soldier who served in the French Navy during the American Revolution, when France aided America. The show tells the story of his life in the late 1700s in America, and later in France during the French Revolution, where he fought in the revolt in the Vendée. I know I've said so far that pretty much everything at Puy Du Fou is gigantic, but for a theme park, this show really is massive. The theatre was custom built for the show and can hold up to 2,400 people. Its seating area is in the middle of the building, and the sets for the various scenes of the show are built around the audience on 6 stage areas. Between the different scenes in the show, the audience rotate on a large turntable in a sort of inverse carousel of progress style, with transitions enhanced by immersive, floor-to-ceiling mapped projections on the walls around them. The sets themselves are equally impressive, especially this one of a cross-section of a French naval ship, and this one from near the end of the show of a beach, with real sand, rocks and water on this indoor stage, and a mapped projection of the ocean in the background. The show also features original music, ornate costuming, live animals, stunt performances, and to top it all off, is performed up to 7 times in a day. According to Puy Du Fou's website, The Last Plume is so good in fact, that it was awarded Best Show in the World in 2016. But it doesn't say who from, just Best Show in the World. 2016. I did do a bit of digging on this, and I found it actually did get an award by the Themed Entertainment Association at their awards show in 2017 for Outstanding Achievement in the Live Show category, which is a legitimate award by a real organisation. But there's just something funny about them not mentioning where the award came from and just calling it Best Show in the World instead. Call it lost in translation, I guess. And the final major show at Puy Du Fou worth a mention is located at the very back of the park, far away from the other shows, with a long pathway setting up a Disney-style sightline to it, and it's called the Sign of Triumph. Before The Last Plume came along, I think the Sign of Triumph was Puy Du Fou's biggest show. Set in a large Roman amphitheatre, the Sign of Triumph is a recreation of a day at the gladiator games of ancient Rome. The amphitheatre itself is, again, just another example of the scale of Puy Du Fou. It's over 100 meters long, and is actually larger than a lot of real Roman amphitheatres around Europe. Strangely enough though, it's actually not the only recreation of a Roman amphitheatre at a theme park in France, but it is the most impressive. The show itself takes place in Gaul, the name for this area of Europe during the time of the Romans, where the Roman Empire has subjugated the local populace and forced them to perform in a gladiator show, as a display of Rome's power over Gaul and over us, the audience. The show begins with a parade of Roman soldiers and wild animals, followed by an appearance of the governor of the region, there on behalf of the Roman Emperor Diocletian, who addresses the crowd as subjects of the Roman Empire, who have come to attend a gladiator games. The governor then introduces the captive Gaul prisoners, who he announces must win their freedom by succeeding in the games. The main character of the show, a centurion, but also a Gaul, named Damien, volunteers instead to try and save the ghouls by competing in gladiatorial combat. The governor accepts, and multiple gladiators then enter the arena as the fight begins. Another coordinated fight sequence between multiple actors in various gladiator costumes, and really just a cool visual moment. Damien survives the fight, but then has to compete in the next challenge, a chariot race. The audience then watch as 4 full chariots race around the arena, with 2 of the chariots breaking mid-race in dramatic fashion. Damien wins the chariot race, but the governor is still not satisfied, and demands he pass one final challenge. Another real event held in Roman amphitheatres called Naumachia. The centre stage of the arena suddenly rotates and transforms into a Roman ship, and a naval battle ensues where smaller boats fight against it. Finally, Damien defeats his opponents, and the ghouls emerge victorious, winning their freedom. The Roman show at Puy Du Fou was my favourite when I visited when I was younger, and looking back at it now, I can see why. The scale of the show and just the craziness of recreating a full gladiator games is incredible. It's sort of like watching Ben-Hur in person, and it's obviously highly dramatised, but I wonder if this is the closest you can get in the world to how it might have been to attend the Colosseum in ancient Rome. There also used to be an entirely different end scene, where instead of the naval battle, a live lion was brought into the arena. There are also other shows beyond the ones I've mentioned, all set in other periods of French history. There's the Dance of the Phantom Birds, a birds of prey show akin to something like Feathered Friends of Flight at Animal Kingdom, The Mime and the Star, an indoor theatre show set in the silent movie era of French cinema, with moving sets to simulate the backgrounds of a black and white movie, and The Fire Wedding, another nighttime show among the fountains of one of the park's lakes. Puy Du Fou also has several walkthrough attractions that use live actors to create an immersive story, somewhat similar to a show like the now closed Poseidon's Fury at Islands of Adventure. One of these is The First Kingdom, a walkthrough attraction set around the year 500, during the reign of King Clovis, King of the Franks, which uses live actors and special effects such as 360-degree sound and 3D video mapping to tell a story of his reign, interwoven with scenes from Norse mythology. There's also The Lovers of Verdun, an immersive journey through the realistic trenches of the French army during World War I, and The Mystery of La Pérouse, a journey aboard a late 18th century ship of the explorer La Pérouse, who famously went missing on this very expedition. This show actually is even more like Poseidon's Fury, because it also has that one water feature from the show. All 3 of these shows use a combination of set design, special effects, and live actors to pull guests into their world, and provide a level of immersion you wouldn't get with a standard theme park attraction, and an intimacy of storytelling beyond the larger scale shows at Puy Du Fou. Puy Du Fou as a whole is absolute insanity. It seems like every show just follows the philosophy of making things as big and outlandish as possible. There's a high level of commitment to detailed, realistic theming, which makes the park feel incredibly lifelike. I guess with the way the park's attractions are entirely shows, this can become a bit easier, because you don't need to have things like loading areas and ride tracks and vehicles that would break immersion and theme parkify the image of the area. Instead, the only thing that really does this are the seating areas. But nonetheless, the detail not just in the shows themselves, but in the themed areas around the attractions, the village outside of the Vikings show, the medieval streets near the Knights of the Round Table, and the turn-of-the-century French village square near the entrance to the park are all so well done they feel more like movie sets than they do theme park areas. In a way, the park is almost too well themed. So much of it feels more like a botanical garden mixed with a themed village than any sort of consciously laid out theme park, which, while beautiful looking, can be hard to navigate and find the attractions you're looking for. While researching this park, I kept asking myself, what is it that makes Puy Du Fou look so different from any other park? Even the other French theme parks that I've been to. A lot of the theming is part of it, and the lack of rides, but there is another thing that makes Puy Du Fou so different that you don't realise until it's pointed out. It's that this park has no lines. Think about it. If you're somewhere like Disney or Universal, one of the most common sights as you walk through an area is a constant stream of people outside various attractions queuing behind a rope, with a signposted wait time somewhere nearby. It's part of our accepted theme park iconography, and when we see it, it blends into the background. But when it's not there, something starts to feel different that we can't quite place. There are lines in some places, but only just before a show as people file into it, and then they clear up. But it's just another one of those weird things that makes Puy Du Fou unlike any other park I know of. So with everything I've said, it seems like Puy Du Fou is this absolutely incredible hidden gem in France that ranks among the world's best theme parks. And that is partially true, but there are some problems with Puy Du Fou I'd like to talk about, because while this park is great in many ways, it's also really weird. I think for starters, the over Frenchness of the park does hurt it quite a bit. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. I'm not saying that something simply being French is a negative. I don't have a particularly big French audience, but I'd hate for the small number of you that are here to think that I just dislike France for some reason. What I mean is that it's obvious that the park is only really aimed at a domestic audience. While I have been to Puy Du Fou and I did enjoy it, the nature of its content being about parts of French history that aren't that well known outside the country does make it that much harder to understand what's going on, especially because the translation in the park for foreign audiences is really bad. Since I last went, the park does now offer an app where you can listen to live translations of shows in a number of languages, but according to reviews, it's frustrating to use and works poorly. And if the information provided on the website is anything to go by, the quality of the translations will be poor too. There are a lot of theme parks in the world where a language barrier doesn't really matter, but with all the shows at Puy Du Fou, not knowing what's going on half the time does make enjoying the park that little bit more difficult. Beyond limiting itself when it comes to foreign audiences though, the park is also really creepy and unsettling in places, particularly if you're a lot younger. So much of Puy Du Fou has a really serious tone, which can be quite dark in places. A lot of the shows warn that they may not be appropriate for younger children due to violence or just a general dark atmosphere. All of the walkthrough attractions are varying levels of creepy, but believe it or not, they actually used to be much worse. So Puy Du Fou used to have this attraction called the Road of Memories, or Memory Road, Memory Lane, depending on your translation, which was another walkthrough attraction set during an era of French history called the Reign of Terror, an infamous period in the late 1700s during the Revolution where tens of thousands of people died. And in the walkthrough attraction, you go through a dark and creepy area as dramatic music plays and you see several dioramas of decorated mannequins being killed in the Reign of Terror. Something that surprised and completely traumatized younger me, as I didn't know it was going to happen because all of the signs are in French. The lack of rides, as much as it is something that makes the park so interesting, may also hurt Puy Du Fou quite a bit, because despite how spectacular the shows may be, sometimes people do just want to ride rides. And if you're left with a choice between a park with rides and shows and a park with just shows, you might be inclined to pick the first option every time. But beyond all of that, there's also something kind of weird about this place that I wanted to mention too, because it's such a great story. In recent years, some French historians, as well as some newspapers, have leveled criticism against Puy Du Fou and its founder Philippe de Villiers, accusing the park of distorting and sometimes blatantly misrepresenting history in order to suit a political agenda. Philippe de Villiers has run for president of France twice on a right-wing nationalist platform, so he is frequently involved in politics. I'm heavily oversimplifying here, but his detractors have alleged that Puy Du Fou is used by de Villiers as propaganda to promote the idea that France have always been the good guys of history, and that the nation was better off back in the good old days and they need to get back to that. They also allege that the park attempts to subtly promote France's predominant religion, Catholicism, to park guests as a key to France's success and stability in an increasingly secular nation. If you look at a lot of the attractions, the park does seem to promote religion as being central to the identity of all of the good guys in its shows. The Gauls in the Roman show are captured because they're Christians. The walkthrough attractions such as the First Kingdom and the Lovers of Verdun feature religious iconography throughout, and I couldn't quite figure this one out, but it seems to me that after the Vikings are defeated in that show, they all then decide to, I guess, convert to Christianity, which is all a bit weird, sure, but not really the bit that I wanted to talk about. This is the really crazy part. The allegations of de Villiers' political motivations with Puy Du Fou are also supported by the fact that in August 2014, he travelled to Russian-occupied Crimea to have a personal meeting with Vladimir Putin, and returned to France, announcing plans to build a Russian Puy Du Fou in Crimea, to promote the idea that occupied Crimea is supposedly a part of Russia. I don't know about you, but I just love when I set out to write a video about a theme park, and I accidentally uncover a story of international politics. Sadly, as much as I would have loved to cover what could well be an even more insane park than Puy Du Fou, to this day, De Villiers Crimean Park has not opened. Whatever your opinions might be of France's goofiest guy, I think we can still admit that Puy Du Fou is a seriously impressive park. I think what impresses me most about Puy Du Fou is not just the gargantuan scale of the shows, but how different this park is from anything else I've seen. In a world where it seems like every park is trying to be a cheaper version of Disneyland, Puy Du Fou ignored all of that and made a park that is so focused, the concept on its own is enough to capture your interest. Puy Du Fou is a theme park that doesn't really feel like a theme park, and that does wonders for its immersion, but it's also what hurts it in some ways. Focused is such a great word to describe Puy Du Fou with. It's a park that really took the theme in theme parks seriously, and that's what makes it unique. Well, you know, unique apart from the other Puy Du Fou that opened a few years ago in Spain, but you get the idea. What are your opinions about Puy Du Fou? If you've been, or if you haven't, what's your impression of France's crazy historical theme park with no rides? Please let me know in the comments. And if you liked the video, please consider subscribing. I hope you've enjoyed my slight departure from Disney this time, and I've got a lot more videos about the world of theme parks coming in the future. But for now, if there's anything else you'd like me to cover on this channel, please let me know, and as always, I'll see you next time.